What's up, dude?
How's it going? We're live.
We are live, indeed.
Yeah, indeed.
A special episode of the Vanguard live stream covering the movement for a People's Party. Obviously, Gavin and I have spent much of our time, really, since we've started the Vanguard podcast, covering the movement for a People's Party. And as of late, there's been quite a few developments. I guess you could call them, not necessarily the most positive ones. And today we're speaking with a few ex-members to kind of share their experience and what it was like when they were volunteering with the Movement for a People's Party.
Yeah, exactly. And as Zach said, we've been on this beat for a while. We've been covering the People's Party for a while since our channel has been around. And this is just as worthy of coverage. There's some channels or some commentators that would like to just kind of move beyond this and never speak about it, sweep it under the rug. But here at the Vanguard, we're trying to uphold a certain level of journalistic integrity when we talk about stuff like this. And we wanted to be fair and make sure to bring on people to tell their experiences and share their stories. Because again, here at the Vanguard, we really do appreciate and stand in solidarity with all of the hard grassroots organizing that's really going on the ground, all the actual labor that's being put in by people whose names are not, well known to those in the leftist community. They may not be celebrities, so to speak, within these circles, but they are the ones powering these movements on the ground. And it's just as important to hear out their experiences as, those with bigger names and bigger platforms. So again, we're not trying to disempower any movement here or any organization. We think there's a lot of great work being done with and in collaboration with the People's Party. So much great organizing going on, like I said, in association with them. We've had plenty of activists on our show that are associated with the People's Party. We think they're doing great work. And again, we're not trying to disempower this movement. We're trying to bring some accountability and transparency.
Yeah, holding accountable is exactly, I think, the right way of putting it, right? There has to be accountability.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we all acknowledge should be part of the antidote to the two-party duopoly, right? Two parties that are incredibly corrupt, have no real accountability to the grassroots, to the people, and any movement that is, presenting itself as an alternative or an antidote to that, it needs to uphold certain values itself. And I think accountability and transparency are honestly the very least of which we could ask for. Those are the bare minimum. So again, this is about making sure that we have accountability and transparency. And also, we want to make sure that our fellow comrades aren't wasting their time, their energy, and their money on an organization that potentially might mistreat them. So again, we just want to make sure everyone's experience is represented. And I guess the last thing I want to say is that we reached out to the People's Party to be a part of this live stream. Again, I'll repeat, we reached out to Nick Brana and the People's Party to be here with us today so that their side of the story could be represented. And we're not the only channel that's reached out to engage, to try to have this discussion. Honestly, a discussion that really does need to be and we were completely ghosted. There was no response. Seemingly, leadership does not want to engage in this conversation. So, if you're watching this and you're from the People's Party and you're upset and feel like this isn't fair and that we're not representing their side of the story, I just want you to know that we tried and that we wanted
we've reached out to them multiple times before now. To be frank, we have reached out to them to have individual conversations. We've reached out for comments. We've reached out for a participation in our panel. It doesn't seem like they're interested in responding to anybody who's going to apply an ounce of pressure or pushback on any of the claims that they're making, which is why they're going to be absent from this conversation today. Really nothing we can do about that. And without further ado, I guess we'll go ahead and invite on our guests for the day.
Absolutely. Do you want to do this one by one? We can add them on one by one and allow
sure.
each person to introduce themselves. All right. Well, we'll start off with Camilla Harris. How's it going?
Hello. My I is like an E, so it's Camila.
Camila.
And no association with Kamala. Just none.
Well, how are you today, Camila? And could you introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the MPP?
Yes, thank you, Gavin and Zach, for having us on. I also want to shout out KRTD Media as well as Mikasa Sukasa. We've been on their platforms as well. And we really appreciate you guys allowing us to come and tell our testimonies and stories. I'm Camila Harris, as it's been introduced, and I'm from Inglewood, California. So if you heard of the term or phrase of Inglewood is up to no good, I'm actually from the city of Inglewood in California. And I was involved with Movement for a People's Party for an accumulation of 6 months. I technically joined via their website with the volunteer form and, agreed to the community agreements, things like that. And I was onboarded twice. The first time I was onboarded to just be a volunteer, regular volunteer. And then the second time I was onboarded to be a local hub coordinator. So for me, this was like a jump, into something that I've actually never done. I've never been like an organizer on the ground. I've been a political campaign volunteer for Tulsi Gabbard as well as Barack Obama in my past. But I had never, ventured into doing on the ground work. And that was my whole thing. Like, wow, I get to do something new that I've never done before. And so I learned about Movement for a People's Party through Ryan Knight. And this was long before his Amped Up podcast and, and all that kind of stuff. We were like Twitter buddies, and he started pumping up Movement for a People's Party. And I'm like, what the heck is that? Never heard of it. So when I was in Movement for a People's Party, I actually had different roles. Besides the hub coordinator position, I was also the secretary of the Black Voter Circle. I was involved with the Poor People's Circle as well. And I also was in working groups. So two working groups. One was media and messaging, and the other one was organizing. So I was one of the faces people would see as a new volunteer weekly to, orientate them into Slack, our workspace and things like that. And then in my other working group, I was in Twitter and Facebook circles. And so I was really involved with the Movement for a People's Party. And then on the petitioner side, which is also part of my story that we can, talk about later.
Yeah, we'll get everybody in on the podcast, and then we can dive into the petition.
Yeah, I was also secretary of that petitioners group. So I just wanted to mention that I was actually in the leadership of the petitioners group.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And we look forward to hearing even more about your experiences. Next, we'll add on Renee. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right.
Doing well. I guess if you could just give us a brief introduction to you and how you got involved volunteering with the Movement for a People's Party.
Sure. I'm Renee. I am in Brooklyn, New York. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. I got involved because Amaya, actually, who spoke at the People's Party convention, she is running the student movement. I previously volunteered with her for another organization, and I watched it literally so I could see Amaya speak and really got excited. And just the idea of doing something that was going to allow me to not have to have fights about voting blue no matter who, which I haven't done in over a decade anyway. And, I was really fired up about the opportunity to be on the ground level of something that was going to give people a real third option, an alternate option that was going to be run by the people and was going to be a voice of the people. And so I joined in immediately after watching the convention. So that's how I got involved.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. And I think that your experience probably speaks to all of our experiences here. I think everyone that's going to be a part of this panel today, including Zach and I, we're all very excited about the potential of the People's Party, even just a few months ago. So if anyone's watching, I just think that should be understood. We're all people that wanted this to succeed, and to some extent probably still do hope it does, or at least another similar project does. So yeah, I think that's important context for this conversation too. And thank you so much for joining us today, Renee.
Thanks for letting us come on.
Of course.
Next up, what's up, Steve?
I think we might be struggling to get some audio from you, Steve.
Sounds like you might be muted.
Here. Oh. Struggling to get the audio from you. Here, we can try having you come back out and come back in.
Yeah, I would try reconnecting your audio. Open your system's preferences on your computers, check your audio, and we'll add you back on after we introduce Lisa. How's it going, Lisa?
Good. Thank you for having me. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess if you could just briefly introduce yourself and let people know how you began your work with the Movement for a People's Party.
Well, I'm Lisa Peffer. I live in a small town in a very Republican area between Rochester and Buffalo, New York. And I've only been recently politicized. I turn 36 next month. So, hi, Trudy. So my first time voting was the 2018 midterms. And I didn't even know what left, right, center, blue, all that, until Trump was elected. And I've only recently realized I wanted to get more involved the more I learned about politics and what that was all about. And it wasn't until the summer, I think I tried to join late July, but this was before the convention and I was having some trouble getting in their Slack. And mainly because when Bernie dropped out and this whole thing with them propping Joe Biden as being progressive, but nothing will change, it just seemed like more of the same. It was this token, you need to vote blue no matter who, and then there was Trump. So right before the convention, if you remember, was that 4-day RNC spiel with Donald Trump and how disastrous that was. And then I remember seeing people like Ryan Knight promote on Twitter the convention, and I'm like, I need to check this out because I had already kind of tried to get in but was having problems, and I was a little late coming in, but I was still able to see people like Tim Black, Jimmy Dore, Nina Turner, some of these people that I really respect and looked up to. And I'm like, okay, I need to get back in. And within a few days before September, I was able to get in. And I thought, with my experience, I have 14 years experience in the military, specifically in planning, training, and operations for a brigade of 3,000 soldiers. So I know how to plan, I know how to organize, maybe not in the setting they have, but I can offer my expertise. And in addition to that, I have about 10 years of self-taught digital marketing experience. And I was in college full-time up until December for digital marketing, and I'm on a break right now. So I figured the combination of my planning, training, operations from the military, coinciding with my digital marketing experience, which is a weakness with the Democrats, could be beneficial for Movement for a People's Party. And I guess you wanted to know that's why I joined. Those are the exact reasons I joined.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the help that you've contributed, and also, just for taking that time out of your Saturday to join us this afternoon, Lisa. And I think we're going to try and add Steve back on now. Hopefully we've resolved those audio issues.
What up, man?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So, hey guys, thanks for having us. So yeah, I'm Steve Coleman. I was the Philadelphia hub coordinator for MPP. I got involved a little bit before the convention, I believe it was. It was kind of the same thing for me. I had been involved with the Democrats for years. I had actually been a Democratic committee person. I had ran and was elected in my hometown. So I wanted to get involved at a bigger level with the Dems. And they pretty much told me, like, you're going to have to wait your turn. You're a little bit too radical for us right now. So I decided to see what was around. So I checked out DSA, I checked out the Greens, and that's when I saw that there was going to be the People's Convention. I was really big into Nina Turner, Dr. West. I figured, hey, this could be a cool thing. Like, let me watch this, see what's good. Signed up with their Slack, started digging into everything. And once I realized that they didn't have a coordinator for Philadelphia, I volunteered to get involved in leadership there right away.
Awesome. Well, I guess one of the things that Gavin and I wanted to establish at the beginning of this call was essentially, I guess, the hope that each person present had for the Movement for a People's Party. And, each one of us were taken in some capacity and inspired by the messages of the individuals certainly in their, initial call that brought a lot of attention to the party. but in other avenues as well. You know, and I wanted to get that out in the open, and obviously people can look at the coverage from the Vanguard. You know, we were obviously very excited about the movement for a third party, a true people's party. And I wanted to just kind of set the stage with that as a way of, none of us are necessarily approaching this from the perspective of people who wanted to see problems arise, right? And quite the opposite. You know, and so I just wanted to set the table a little bit with that, because there's been so many bad faith accusations that this is somehow the result of infiltration, or somehow a result of outsiders that are trying to, you know, essentially disturb any kind of third-party movements. The term smear gets thrown around quite frequently. And I wanted to have this panel, and so did Gavin, to just immediately dispense with that and dispel that. Clearly, these you are all individuals who have committed you know, countless hours of time to this movement, wanted it to succeed, were compelled by the messages, and I think that you know, anybody that truly does believe in the tenets and the merits that were espoused by the People's Party, they're gonna also want to you know, hold them accountable, and so that's what the purpose of this call really is everybody you know, kind of joining together to, you know, walk through you know, essentially what's gone wrong, and you know, make sure that you all are heard. So I guess a good place to begin would be the petition itself, right? And I'm wondering if one of you guys would like to kind of kickstart that conversation and start talking about the key tenets of the petition. Renee, are you reaching to? We'd love to just kind of quickly walk through. So for somebody who had only heard good things about the People's Party, and they understand that you know, they maybe they saw what you saw that made you want to join the People's Party. What concerns did you guys raise in the petition? And we can go ahead and throw it up, Gavin, for reference while you're going through it. But I'm wondering if you could walk us through that and some of your guys' key concerns that were raised in your initial petition to the MPP leadership.
Sure. The biggest one I think of all, which is why it was the number one, was that horizontal structure. You know, yes. If you scroll down the doc you're looking at, number one is a formal horizontal organizational structure, including detailed bylaws. The reason we started with that was because it just didn't exist, right? You got involved and you were, you know, on the website where it said we're a horizontal structure and it's going to be self-organizing systems, and you're all excited that you're actually going to be part of a movement where your voice is going to make a difference. And then you get in there and you realize that all the information is being told to you. Everything that you're doing is being given to you. And if you're trying to organize on the ground, there's actually no information to help you with that organization, to help you set up steps, to help you move forward, to help you plan. You're really kind of just thrown out there. So that was the number one thing. And part of that was, you know, democratic decision making. And you can see the list. I don't want to like read to people the hierarchical system, wanting it to not be hierarchical, because you can't be horizontal and hierarchical at the same time, wanting there to be elected leaders and a way to pull leaders out if there was an issue with someone who was in leadership, who to talk to. You know, for a really long time, people would, and there would be dozens of times I would go in the national Slack and someone's question would be, okay, well, how do I find this information out? Because there was no way to figure it out. And there was one pinned message to one channel on the Slack, and it wasn't a very detailed message. So the information was really lacking. A grievance process, because the Slack was toxic and it was very difficult at times for, you know, to see some of the conversations and the discourse that was happening in there. And the final thing for number one, which for me was really important, was financial transparency, and not in this financial working group that everybody keeps talking about that no one asked for, but in the sense that if I go to your transparency page, I can clearly see where your money is coming from and where your money is going. And even to now, despite all these claims that, you know, the petition signers were given false information about the financial transparency. Even to date, on this transparency page, what you're given is a link to the IRS and what term to search for. And then you have to know to click everything in order to actually get information when you try to do the search. And then all you get is whatever information they give to the IRS. It's not exactly transparent. And what, we were looking for was periodic, detailed information so that people knew when they give their money, this is where my money's going. This is how my money's being spent. This is, my confirmation that my, $2, $5, $10, which some people can't afford.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're breaking their backs to give this little bit to try and be a support to this party. And they don't know where their money is going. And to me, that's one of the biggest things that they could have done to really separate themselves from the Democrats and the Republicans, was to have a detailed list. And I even asked, after everything got started, one of the young ladies who, and everybody's young to me, I'm the oldest person on this call, but one of the young ladies who was part of that financial working group. And I said, why are you making people search for information? At the least, why don't you just put the PDFs of your 990s and of your financial, documentation in links? It's the easiest thing to do, right? Well, I'm a trustee for another nonprofit, and that's part of my job. Every year we do the 990, and every year I add a link directly to the 990. I download it in, you click on the link, you read.
And I wanted to ask you, Renee, if anyone might be listening and is wondering about this. Are these asks that were presented on this petition, and we can start with, this first one that we're going over, and you kind of reference this here, are these normal things to expect from such an organization? You just said that as part of your job, you are providing that kind of transparency with periodic, detailed financial reports. And this kind of stuff doesn't exactly seem like, a lofty demand from an organization, which is, again, asking for people's time, volunteer, and money. So
and purporting to be horizontal in its management and leadership structure.
Exactly. So can you just provide some insight into the standards that maybe people would expect when they do work for an organization like this, and maybe to compare it to other similar projects or organizations that are providing transparency?
So honestly, I've never been involved with a nonprofit that didn't have bylaws that you couldn't see the minute you started participation. And they've been very, honestly, the word is like, can I curse? I shouldn't curse. Let me, it's just,
you can say whatever the fuck you want to on the Vanguard.
It's just fucked up. Like, you go into an organization that's a nonprofit that's asking people for money, and I should be able to see how the decisions are made, who gets to make those decisions, who put the people in place that are allowed to make these decisions, what's a quorum. Like, these are not difficult things. These are not things that there's nothing on this document that shouldn't have been in place already, which is part of the reason that the document was written. The whole purpose of this is, why aren't you all already doing these things? And so, when I hear Jackson Inkle saying, oh, well, they couldn't even have done any taxes, they've only been around for less than a year. And I'm like, hello, they started and formed in 2017, and they have 990s going back to 2018. And this is information this is what should be in place. If you can't have bylaws, if you can't tell people what you're doing in your organizational meetings when the 9 of you are sitting on Zoom, if you can't give information as to how decisions are going to be made, if your answer to, wait, where's the democracy is, oh no, it's democratic, we voted on our call and I'm the one who was chosen between the 9 of us, these are not reasonable responses. To call me an infiltrator because I'm telling you your organization is not being run in a way that anybody would support, because you're not doing this very simple things that should be done. And you're telling me, well, we're a 527, so we don't really have to do it that way. And you can wait for the party and for things. I mean, literally, after we were all booted out, Nick literally said, we don't have time for the robust democracy that the party is going to be. And oh yeah, give the eyebrows, because that was my reaction too. And my thought to that is, okay, but if you don't have the time now, after 4 years for the robust democracy that you're giving us at the end of next year, what the hell are you doing? Like, what is going on within the walls of this People's Party that you can't be democratic now? And why would I, as a reasonable adult who's 44 going on 45 years old, absolutely believe that after 4 years of you not being able to figure out the whole democracy thing, that suddenly you're going to figure it out in 6 to 7 months? Like, what am I missing? This is not something.
And just to clarify, Renee, you mentioned that you were booted. Were you booted when you were booted? Were you specifically accused of being an infiltrator?
Yes, me. And to be clear, and I didn't go into this in the intro, I think that whole infiltration thing was the thing that bothered me the most. I was running the New York meetings. They were happening on my husband's Zoom because MPP didn't have extra Zooms for me to use. So I booted my husband off of Zoom every Monday, and he allowed me to meet with the New York people every Monday. And I was literally on the weekly meetings, cooking my family's dinner, dealing with my child, trying to get like regular life stuff going because it's a Monday night, but that was the time that was convenient for the rest of the hub. So for me, I was answering emails for Carol because they needed help going through that big, huge email list that they had going because they were only doing it from one email address. I was putting in all this time and effort. And for all of that, you decided in one night that I was an infiltrator and needed to be removed and all my access was going to be removed overnight without even a consideration of, you know what, Renee's been breaking her ass. Let me at least send her a text message, because let's be clear. Nick had my number. Phil had my number. Regina had my number. Carol had my number. These are all people who I spoke to on the phone.
So they literally just said that? They literally just called you an infiltrator?
They sat on a Zoom call
with no evidence
that I was an infiltrator, and I gotta go.
That they literally just said you're an infiltrator with no evidence, and they said that to you?
Yes, and I got an email telling me that it was out of an abundance of caution. That
it does look like Joe has joined the stream, so we'll go ahead and get him joined on here. Not to cut you off, Renee. We definitely want to jump back into that point, but we did want to get our one of our other guests, Joe, introduced and joined on the call. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Hey, what's up? Hi. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Good.
Thanks so much. Do you want to give yourself a little bit of a... Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can give yourself an introduction if you would like.
Oh, I was just going to say greetings from an hour west of you on I-70.
Indeed. We're from the Midwest as well. Yeah, Joe. You said you're in Topeka. Is that correct?
Yes. Topeka, Kansas, the state capital.
Ooh, holding it down. Oh, yeah. Another Kansas folk.
Yes.
To see it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Joe.
Actually, I just came here from another meeting. I was voted to be the chair of the Kansas Democratic Disability Caucus just moments ago.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. I'm glad that your organizing abilities are being wanted and utilized by that organization.
Thank you. Thank you. So I was hoping I could have good news to share with everybody when I came on the call today.
That's wonderful. Well, like I said, do you want to maybe speak a little bit about how you initially got involved with MPP and maybe just a brief summary of what ended up severing that relationship?
Sure. I originally got involved with MPP because I thought that people with disabilities needed another seat at the table and at another table at that. And so when I got involved, I saw that there was no area in the Slack for people with disabilities. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to ask around and see if I can get a spot in here somewhere for people with disabilities. And then a volunteer by the name of Colin at the time got me set up. He talked to Tiffany, and they set up a people with disabilities political outreach circle. And so, you know, things were doing good. Me and Vivian and Alex and a couple of other people were rocking and rolling. We got the people with disabilities political outreach circle built up to about 41 members. And even Tiffany was very impressed with how I was organizing things so fast and so quick. And we had a call, and she was congratulating me and this, that, and everything else. And it was all kumbaya for a while. And then I thought, well, I'm really going to start using my position here and push for accommodations for people with disabilities, because they had no closed captioning on the national calls, and they had no ASL on the calls. With ASL, for people that are tuning in, is American Sign Language translators. And for an organization that has disability rights on their platform, that is something that they should have been having from day one. So I started asking for accommodations, and then I was told that they couldn't afford it. And I'm like, well, how can you not afford it? I sat on a call with Phil Atetto for 5 hours with the folks that are here on this broadcast today. And I asked Phil, I said, you guys can't hook into a local university's assistive services department and get a volunteer ASL translator to do this, or even a scribe, because they do have scribes in certain assistive services departments to help with people that need note takers and whatnot in class. And so it just kept going and kept going, and I was like, apparently I'm not really going to get what I'm going to get. So I joined the petitioners group because I felt like I wasn't getting heard. And then as soon as I started reading all of the concerns that they were bringing to the table within the petition group, I was just like, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. Like when we were, when I had my circle, there was no documentation on how to build these things out. None whatsoever. We had to pretty much do our own thing. And the only circle that had any kind of really solid plan to model off of was the science circle. They had a really, that's kind of how I modeled some of mine off of. But they had no organizing for political outreach circles to do. As far as structure, like a document. And then I got told that in a political outreach working group meeting that we're not supposed to focus on policy when we're doing political outreach, that we're only supposed to do political outreach. Well, how can you not talk policy and political outreach at the same time? Because you're going to be talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but it seems so ridiculous, and it's just kind of constantly echoed by each of the stories that you all are sharing. That exact kind of, swamp logic, as Gavin and I call it, that has, overtaken the, two-party duopoly that we have in the Republicans. And it's the exact kind of thinking, right? Oh, stay away from policy, like play towards people. It's like, no, people want to know what your policy is, but policy is work, right? So if you, direct people's attention elsewhere, right, you can kind of fly under the radar. It's just the impression that I'm getting from the experiences that you guys are sharing.
Exactly. And there are so many policies that get brushed under the rug with people with disabilities as it is. And for Nick and Tiffany to sit there on a call and tell us not to focus on policy, I'm sorry, I'm not okay with that. And I'm going to push back on that every minute of every day.
And Joe, were you booted from the organization, or did you leave voluntarily?
I was axed.
Because you asked for too many disability services?
No, actually, I pushed back against Thomas Royko on Twitter.
And who's that for people who aren't familiar? Who's Thomas Royko?
Thomas Royko is the IT guy.
So you push back against the MPP IT person on Twitter, and that got you banned from the organization?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was that exchange? What did that exchange look like on Twitter? Just if anyone's curious.
Basically the same thing, that I was pushing for these things to be, these accommodations to be made, and that nobody was listening until almost right up until the point that I got axed. And
Gotcha.
I got axed at 11:50 on February 7th. I got my access to the national Slack, the state Slack, all the base camps, and Action Network revoked. And then they all blocked me on Twitter. Thomas Royko has me blocked. Tiffany, I don't know if she still has her account blocked, but she does have it locked down. Carol has me blocked. Nick has me blocked. MPP has me blocked. And Annelise Garcia has me blocked.
Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you about, Joe, because there's been a screenshot that's been floating around the internet, and that members of the MPP, I've seen, they've pointed to the screenshot as some sort of proof that you or maybe other disaffected volunteers have ill intentions when it comes to the way you're going about raising these accusations. And that's a screenshot in which you were interacting with another ex-volunteer who said, next we need to go after Susan Sarandon and Cornell West, who are, of course, prominent members of the advisory committee. This was following the public stepping down of Ryan Knight from the advisory committee. And it was basically presented in the light of, well, Ryan Knight leaving was great for us. Wouldn't it be great if next we can target Susan Sarandon and Cornell West? And like I said, a lot of people have looked at that and said, this is proof that these people are trying to, take down the MPP. They're infiltrators. They're trying to, sow discord and try to take down their best leaders. And you weren't the one that said that, but you were part of that exchange. And I was wondering, just for the sake of clarity, if you can kind of talk about that exchange and about the nature of it as you saw it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I didn't even know that screenshot had been shared with Susan Sarandon until I watched you guys interview with Annelise. And so I was completely blindsided on that one. But basically all it was we had reached out to Ryan Knight, and I had conversations with Ryan, and Ryan did step down, and I did say, Ryan stepping down from MPP was good for us, because it meant that somebody was actually listening to us instead of Nick. And then when Harley said, next we need to target Susan Sarandon and Cornell West, the only thing we meant by that was we needed to reach out to them next and get them to see the same thing that Ryan had finally seen by us reaching out to him. That was the only intent behind that. There was no malicious intent whatsoever. And they should have contacted me, since I was still an active member of MPP's leadership. They could have contacted me and said, well, what did you mean by this? And
yeah, it seems like it's easy to kind of take it as a super bad faith comment out of context. It is disappointing that there wasn't more follow up or clarity offered, because it does seem like, and even if I don't know, anything like that, it's one of those weird things where like everybody makes jokes, or I don't know. I mean, yeah, like I said, I'm happy that you could provide some clarity there, because a lot of people were using that as essentially justification that all of these claims against the MPP were from bad faith actors.
And I just want to say real quick that, when they first started sharing that screenshot, they shared it with the statement that, see, look, they weren't really working with us on this petition in good faith. And that was their initial, how they put it out there, because there were no dates on it when they put it out there. So it was very easy to make it read just with that piece. If you didn't know that Ryan Knight had stepped down in February, you would have easily thought that we were doing this in the middle of having these conversations about the petition and in the middle of having these negotiations about trying to fix the organization. And that was the part that bothered me, because they had more from that screenshot. And I shared what the top part of that screenshot was that they cut out, which was me saying, yep, I'm definitely going to get labeled an infiltrator now because I spoke to Ryan and all I did was tell him the truth, and he's a grown-up. So my point was, all these things happened weeks after they kicked me out. This, completely took away my access without having a conversation. And at that point, I had no reason to not be honest and to not, when Ryan Knight calls me and says, what happened? Of course, I'm going to tell him the truth. I'm not going to hide. I mean, I would have told him the truth even if I had still been in MPP.
And that was before, and just to clarify, this was before Ryan Knight left this conversation you had with him. So in their eyes, after I was removed,
he wanted to know what happened and he wanted to have a conversation with me.
And then he left to do that. And then he left shortly after. So in their eyes, they probably thought that conversation with Ryan Knight precipitated his exit, which may have led to them erroneously identifying you as an infiltrator.
Right. But the reality is there were a lot of questions from more people than just Ryan Knight. There were a lot more conversations happening before he stepped back. There was a lot more going into it with people asking the same questions that the petition people were at before the petition was written. Part of the reason this went down the petition route was because if you went to Nick or to Rod or to Carol or to anyone with a question, you found yourself out of MPP. So the thought process was, if we write it up, if we give a list of things that will make things better, and if there's a group of us coming to CC and saying, listen, these are the things that are going to help, then they would be less apt to just boot everybody out because there would be so many people in support of these positive changes. Well, of course, we were wrong about that because they
or so we thought.
One night.
and just to clarify one more thing, because her name was mentioned earlier, Annelise Garcia was originally part of that petition. Is that correct?
Not originally. No, they went to her after the petition was already released, after they already had a number of signatures. They went to Annelise because she was somebody that they thought would be listened to. They went to a number of people with the hope of, listen, this is what we're trying to bring to the organization. Can you support us on this? Because all these things are actually going to make MPP better. And then she signed and agreed to participate in the conversations.
She's also the only petitioner to date that asked that her information be held as private on the petition, and the only one to date to ask that her information be removed from the petition.
Okay. And just to clarify for anyone who's not familiar, and we've had Annelise Garcia on our show, she's decided not to comment on this subject. We reached out a while ago. So again, we're trying to be as fair as possible and platform all perspectives. But just for anyone that's listening to this that might be totally confused now, so she originally agreed with and signed on to this petition, but now is essentially, I don't know if smear, I'm guessing you guys would consider smear the right word. She's characterizing you guys who were also part of that petition as nefarious. Do you know what happened and what changed her mind?
Can I speak? Give some background, because this comes. Let me let the audience know. This comes with a lot of background. It comes with a lot of information. It comes with a lot of cross sections when it comes to Movement for a People's Party. So it is kind of a web of things. But let me give some background with the petition, because the petition came about because leaders and managers and volunteers all had similar experiences with Nick Brana and his national coordinator circle. For those who don't know what that is, The National Coordinator Circle is made up of 9 individuals who are like an equivalent of department heads in Movement for a People's Party. So there was Tiffany Anning, who Joe mentioned earlier, who was over political outreach. Nick Brana was also a co-coordinator with Tiffany Anning as well. There was a technical working group, so a department head. That is Thomas Royko. That's who Joe also alluded to as well. I had myself and Renee and Lisa was also in the media and messaging working group. Carol Earl was the leader of that, department or, that working group. Pretty much our departments were called working groups, just to give, some thought pattern with the organizational structure. Also with our geographical stuff, there were layers. There were 3 main layers. So at the top, there's regional. So you had Jerry Perez on. He was my regional coordinator. This is the guy who onboarded me to be a volunteer and also a local hub coordinator. And so under him, there's like the state. So under that layer, there's the state level. So there was 2 people that were over my state hub. We call them hubs, all of them, each layer. So you have the regional, you have the state level, and then you have the local level where me and Steve worked on as hub coordinators. So all of the geographical stuff is called hubs, HUBS. Okay. So with the department heads, they all make up the National Coordinator Circle. So Nick Brana, his formal title is National Coordinator. So this is the head guy in charge. Okay. And so they would have meetings, like Renee said. They would literally have meetings. We have had people rumor to us that they've had meetings up to 6 hours trying to, appease Nick or get Nick to understand, sides that need to be addressed and stuff. So when Renee talks about these, midnight Zoom calls and stuff to make decisions to boot us out, that was some real stuff. Like, they didn't have decisions to address like our annotated petition, which is another part of the story, because it wasn't just that original petition that you put up, but we also had kind of a response to that as well. And there was also drama to get response from the leadership on our original petition. It took them a month to give us a written formal document about the original petition. And the annotated petition was basically us, letting them know where they met, some of the standards in some form, or where they fell short on some of those things that we listed in the original petition. That was what the annotated petition was. And they never read it. Instead, they chose to have a midnight Zoom call to line us up and kick us out because they didn't want to deal with it anymore. They didn't want to deal with the systemic issues that was going on in Movement for a People's Party. They're about the optics. That's what they're about. They're about what makes them look good to the public so they can have more eyeballs, more emails, more subscriptions, more follows, more being in with what I call the celebrity left.
Well,
he was doing that kind of stuff.
Camila, do you have any insight as to why Annelise decided to stop trusting the petitioners? Essentially, because again, as I referenced, originally she signed on to the petition and seemed sympathetic and even in agreement with the stated goals of the petition, but then seemingly over the course of this whole debacle, she totally switched positions and is now characterizing you guys in nefarious light. So I'm just wondering if anyone has any insight into what changed her mind.
Let me tell you about Miss Annelise Garcia, because I'm from the state of California. Annelise Garcia was on the board of Our Revolution Los Angeles. Correct. Okay. And so Our Revolution Los Angeles had somewhat of a, I would say like a semi-merge, if you will, with Movement for a People's Party. Yep. So there were people that they were utilizing that was in the leadership of ORLA for the acronym, like Jerry Perez. There was a few other people that were in, kind of leadership positions, if you will, in ORLA. So this became a thing when ORLA, learned about what was going on with the mistreatment of volunteers and also the hemorrhaging of volunteers, because there was a lot of turnover way before this petition started. This was the ruining, I would say, or the sabotage of this leadership with Nick Brana not knowing how to deal with the People's Convention bounce. if your audience is familiar with a bounce, with like say the DNC, after that they have their convention, they get this bounce where, they might get an increase in emails or increase in membership or increase in some form. Well, Nick Brown and his national coordinator circle ruined that because they didn't have the infrastructure to handle the pour-in of people like ourselves here and actually funnel us to places where we can begin work. Because we came into work. We didn't come in for all this other stuff. That's why they make up stories like, oh, we were infiltrated and all this kind of stuff, is because the truth was we actually came into work, and our petitioners group was about reform. And even to put it in other terms, we were like a union coming to the leadership about problems with our labor, not getting support for our labor. We were like the labor for a movement for a People's Party. This is what people got to understand. It's kind of like the Amazon workers, nobody's telling them, oh, you should just walk away quietly and don't say nothing about how Amazon treated you. Don't protest about that. Because the thing about moving for a People's Party is that they live on social media. So with us, we're social media protesting. We are whistleblowing. What's going on? Like that's the equivalent that you have to understand. And
Absolutely.
So a lot of people are like, saying, well, y'all trying to sabotage and attack. I'm like, no, we're exposing movement for a People's Party. What you do with that information is your choice. You're a grown adult, like Renee says all the time. You're a grown adult. You can make your own decisions, but we're going to raise those red flags too. We're going to show you what it really is like.
Yeah, I just want to jump back in here and maybe, steer the ship a little bit into something that I wanted to get some clarity on from you guys. And that would be, I guess, specifically the steps that were taken in the reaction that you got from the MPP leadership, sort of immediately following the delivery of the petition, as well as, the kind of, if any, obviously Gavin and I haven't heard back from the People's Party to confirm but, if any that you were aware of, have any of the changes that you guys were pushing for been adopted? Has there been increased democracy in the organization? Has there been more transparency? I'm wondering if one of you would maybe be able to walk us through kind of the initial stages of the reaction that you got from the MPP leadership after the petition was delivered.
So I think I can chime in here because I was one of the early signers, and I knew it was coming based on some events Camila has talked about before on her Missing October. And specifically when I was having problems just getting actual work, I was joining these working groups, the media messaging, as Camila said, and then I was in creative arts. And I was just in this weird limbo the first 4 or 5 weeks where I would show up to these meetings, put my name to a list with the experience I have, and then nothing happens. No one would contact me. If I contacted someone, nothing would happen. And then around October, I started getting a hold of Jerry Perez when I learned they had a veterans group. And from there, he onboarded me, not the East Coast Regional, Jerry Perez, who was working 12 to 17 hours a day to onboard people throughout the United States, if anyone does not know, for months.
Yeah, and we've spoken with Jerry on 2 occasions, so if anybody's curious and want to learn more about him and his role in the People's Party, they can check out both those interviews.
Yes, so the thing with Jerry Perez is he was a West Coast Regional Coordinator, the Veterans Coordinator for the whole United States, as well as a member of ORLA. So if anyone's kind of confused all these moving pieces, that's where this whole ORLA thing comes in. And what ended up happening is he onboarded... Our
Revolution in Los Angeles, for those of us who aren't plugged into the lingo.
Yes, sorry. So he onboarded me October 1st, and this is weeks after I had contacted my regional and never heard back. And that was kind of the thing that would happen. You would show up to these meetings, never hear back. You'd message someone, never hear back. So Jerry did it. He contacted me back right away, and we had a Zoom call. And he onboarded me and said, hey, I think you would be great for a regional coordinator. And it would be about 20, 25 hours a week. And then if they are good to go with that, we want you to become, or at least I'll present the idea that you could become the East Coast Regional Coordinator. Now, both of these roles would mean that I would have to dedicate up to 30 hours a week to do the East Coast, which is Phil Ateto's job. However, they were so swamped, the idea was they could somehow split it where it made sense. And then I would do at some point the Veterans Coordinator for the East Coast. And he set up and facilitated a meeting with Phil. That was, again, in October. And then when I didn't hear back from Phil after that, Jerry got back to me. And that was October 14th. And I was approved to become an assistant regional to train with Jerry, not with Phil, who was supposed to be doing this, not Jerry. And then, so then a few days later, all out of the blue, one of our working group heads, who was very active in the group in creative arts, just sent an email out on Action Network saying he resigned. And he mentioned kind of vaguely why. And that was alarming, because what I didn't say before is when I first joined Slack, people were going back and forth asking why two people of regenerative culture were not only removed, but demoted. And I had no idea what any of that was about. And all those posts would go on to be deleted, but I would remember it. And I'm like, well, this is bizarre. Someone who was working a full-time job and doing nearly a full-time working group position up and resigned. So that following week, actually the Sunday, Nick Brana would join us on our weekly call to talk specifically about why he left. And it didn't make sense. It was miscommunication and something about a logo where we were supposed to do it, but no, actually it's this, and he just didn't understand, like a real prima donna type of response, and it just didn't make sense. And that meeting went on for 2 or 3 hours, and we brought up pretty much everything in the petition, but this was not a petition. It did not exist yet, and we were promised a response within a week. You can kind of figure out what happened. However, that night, right after that meeting, Jerry started his veterans meeting going into what would become letting us know there's a petition coming. And then he asked us if anyone knew what had happened. And I chimed in with the meeting we just had. Then about a day or two later, the next working group had left, which was the co-coordinator in that same group. And it was someone, again, who was retired, I believe, and pretty much worked full-time in the group. It just was bizarre. And I remember watching this meeting with Nick Brana and kind of explained what had happened. And I was watching her reaction, and it kind of confirmed to me at that time something wasn't jiving, not just the words, but her reaction. And so I reached Jerry Perez and I told him, I'm like, hey, did you hear about this? Because what's going on? And then all of a sudden we hear about another volunteer the same day she was resigned, removed from all access, who had access to everything, like a major player within the community, all of a sudden removed. And it spiraled from there. And
yeah, well, that seems to be kind of a recurring theme, right? Is that just sort of how they handled every conflict throughout the MPP leadership? It was if somebody is, raising concerns or, is being, a problem essentially for the MPP leadership, they were just anti-democratically booted.
Yes. Or they would disappear and no one would know, because they would get a generic email. And what happened for that volunteer that was clearly retaliated against, which I'll get into, they got no response when they were trying to reach out. Like, what happened? Why did he get removed at the same time she resigned? And I hope, let me see how to explain this best, because NDAs, so I have to be careful. What would come to light is the answer we got in the future meeting about this one person resigning. That second person, we had another meeting with Nick Brana, which was one sentence explanation, and it was the same reason of why that first person left. So there was no discussion.
What was that one sentence? Do you remember?
It was something to the effect of, it was because of the miscommunication with the same thing. And kind of redirecting that they left because of that. That is not what happened. That will be forthcoming. That will be in the future. I cannot relay right now. But the retaliation against this third volunteer was because they believed that this person convinced the second one that resigned to leave, which had nothing to do with anything. However, I will state now, in the future in these negotiations, because they did sign the petition, because the petition was circulating about a week or week and a half after November 1st, they signed it. They had a problem that not only were they on the first call, but that they signed it at all. And they were labeled as abusive. by MPP leadership. And they could not participate in future petition talks or calls.
Wow. Well,
yes.
That's crazy. I did want to bring Steve into the conversation a little bit. You've been chilling over there, Steve, and I wanted to hear your experiences a little bit. I guess a good place to start with you, and I heard you mention this on here. I'm gonna mute your mic while I'm talking because I can hear myself through your speakers, but I'll unmute you as soon as I'm done. Anyway, I heard you speaking about your experiences a little bit on our friend of the show, Franco's channel. And you talked a little bit about how you were trying to run for local office. I believe it was state representative potentially or something along those lines. And you wanted to run as a Movement for a People's Party candidate, and you wanted their help with that goal. And you were essentially met with the message that they weren't investing in local races. They were focused on taking out high-profile incumbent Democrats mainly, and that it wasn't really worth their time or energy to help you in your pursuit of getting elected to, again, further the values espoused by the People's Party and on their platform. And I just was so struck by the insanity and stupidity of that. Obviously, to be taken seriously as a third-party organization, it would probably be sensible to get some people elected first. And on the local level, lots of work can be done. Look at what Shama Sawant has done in Seattle at the city council level. I mean, she's arguably done more than people in Congress themselves with far more power and far bigger platforms. So it's ridiculous on its face value that they wouldn't want to pursue a strategy of electing local, leaders such as yourself, Steve, into positions of power, even if they're quote unquote small positions of power. So I just wanted to have you talk a little bit about that experience and also just anything else you wanted to add, maybe echoing some of the concerns that our other, other people here on this call have talked about.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll start with what you were just saying as far as the trying to get elected to the local position. It was the Pennsylvania House seat that I wanted to run for. And there was a couple other people as well who were trying to get involved and run local races. One person by the name of Sass. I want to give a shout out to Sass because he is awesome. But he was somebody who was very vocal as well. He was very big into ranked choice voting and trying to get MPP to implement that. Great ideas that could have really pushed the party forward with the Democratic, ideals that we were talking about. So one of the people that had come to us, they were an advisor for campaigns, and they were really trying to help us get started, with what we need to do to get petitions signed, what we need to do to get ballot access, all of this stuff. And so they had gone to Nick privately and asked him, what can we do to get support for these guys? I really think that they're going to have winnable races at the local level. And me personally, I think if you're going to get anything done, it needs to be at the local level. So what can we do to help these guys out? And that's when Nick said essentially what you had said, that they were going to handpick around 5 to 10 people who had been involved with the Democratic Party before, who had run in high-profile races and lost, that they thought that they could bring into the fold.
Wait, just to clarify, Steve, there was no intention to have these individuals be democratically elected and decided on by the Movement for a People Party volunteers and members. They were going to be handpicked by the Movement for a People's Party leadership that were, again, not democratically elected by the members and organizers of the Movement for a People's Party. Just checking.
Absolutely. That is what was told to us. So when we said, this is crazy, like, how are you going to do this? That's when they said, oh, well, maybe we can bump it up to 20 people, including, local people that are trying to get started, and then we can kind of decide where to go from there. So it was right away. We were like, are you kidding me? Like, you have no strategy for the local level. All you care about is the presidency and Congress. So that's when I was really like, wow, this is this is crazy. Now, to echo some of the things from before, I know the one question that you guys had asked was kind of how they reacted when the petition was presented to them, and then speaking to what they have accomplished since then. The first meeting with them, it seemed like things were okay. At first they were very taken back. They were like, you kind of ambushed us with this. We weren't expecting all of this. And, we need a little bit more time than you're giving us to respond. Give us about a week. Then an hour later in the same call, another member of the CC had admitted that actually somebody had already sent them the petition. We didn't ambush them, and they had spent 3 to 5 hours the night before preparing for this meeting. So right away, there was already some kind of like, I don't really trust this, because they were lying about if they even had the petition. But we decided to give them the benefit of the doubt and schedule for a week out. And, since then, there have been a few things that they have come around on, but there's nothing major that they've come around on. We asked for the reinstatement of regenerative culture as a big working group, and they said that they were going to, do a vote on that.
For people who aren't familiar, I don't want to cut you off. I just want regenerative culture. That would be like the HR human resources arm of the Movement for a People's Party, just to give some context and clarity for people. So essentially, they had removed the HR department, which is, for people who aren't familiar with corporate America, equivalent of where you would go to raise your concerns with your management and leadership. Essentially, they'd removed that department, and one of your guys' request was to have that reinstated, just to clarify.
Yes, correct. We had wanted the regenerative culture group to be a full working group again, so that they had a member on CC and had voting rights within the CC. To this day, that still hasn't happened. But hey, what are you going to do? A couple other things that did happen. We had brought up the horizontal structure thing and how on their website it said that they were a horizontal organization. We finally got clarity that they were never intending to be a horizontal organization, and we got them to remove that language from the website. And
I wanted to talk a little bit more about the whole horizontal leadership thing. And I saw, Renee, you mentioned in the comments that Nick owns MPP. What is the Movement for a People's Party as an organization? Is it a corporation? Is it?
Yeah, you've been calling it the People's Corporation, Gavin. Yeah. That was hilarious.
It really seems to resemble that kind of a structure more so than any sort of a democratic organization that we would see in other third-party projects, at least, from what I'm aware of. It truly does seem unique in the sense that, like, Nick is just the owner or the manager or the CEO. Yeah. So what do you guys see MPP as structurally, and how do you think that it should be structured?
So what MPP actually is a DBA of a 527 called, and I always do this, Camilla always has to correct me because I'm always screwing it up. I think it's People for Working Democracy. See, I remembered this time. And so that is the ownership level. So Draft Bernie, Movement for a People's Party, all these things are all DBAs of that 527, which is what they use to hide behind the fact that they haven't done any of the real stuff that you would expect from a nonprofit. So they are a nonprofit, which is what a 527 is. But because a 527 is really supposed to be for a party, that's what they use to say, well, when we're a party, we're going to do all these things. When we're a party, we'll vote on the platform. When we're a party, we'll do this. When we're a party, we'll do that. And it's because they're actually bracketed under the 527, not a regular 501c3 or 501c4 or a PAC or any of these things that, legally you have to have these things in place. 527s are kind of in a no man's land.
So it's a nonprofit, but does that mean that they could still be paying themselves? Yes,
they could be, because, one of the big things that people don't understand about nonprofits is a nonprofit does not mean you cannot make a profit.
Exactly.
A nonprofit means you can't pay private shareholders, and you can't make more money than you're supposed to for, your title. That's what a nonprofit means. It doesn't mean you can't make.
Remember when there was that big scandal? I'm pretty sure it was the Wounded Warriors Project, where those guys were paying themselves a shit ton of money to run that project, and they were giving themselves like $1 million salaries, taking money from obviously people who did not have money to lose, and obviously that's corruption. But it is exactly that same way that and obviously, since the financials aren't transparent and public, we have no way of knowing.
And that's the
thing. Can I add something really quick?
Oh, of course, yeah.
About is I'm not going to make any statements about what they're doing with the money, what they're not doing with the money, because I can't see it. My problem is I can't see it. And that's, to me, that's something that's really important. And just, quickly based on what Steve was saying, one of my arguments with Phil that I kept having over and over again was this failure to fully understand the mission, right? Like this idea that, and it drives me nuts every time Nick is on somebody's show talking about how easy it's going to be to get ballot access. What annoys me is it's not that easy. Like he makes it sound like he just has to send a few people out to gather signatures, and that's just not true. There's so much more to it. Right. And in some states, signatures have nothing to do with ballot access. And so, this failure to understand what's really required across the country to get ballot access, and this failure to understand if you're not organizing locally, you can't get anywhere. Even if you don't win locally, that's how you build a movement.
Were you guys at all disappointed that the People's Party didn't initially intend to or try to collaborate more with the Green Party? Because obviously there's been significant disagreements as far as strategy and branding and all of that stuff. But one thing that's undeniable is that the Green Party has put in a lot of that work, and they do have a lot of that infrastructure when it comes to being on the ballot in key states. And I personally just thought it was downright suicidal of them to turn away, seemingly, the Green Party when they reached out around the convention time, as far as I understand the events as they occurred. Again, not necessarily because the approaches are the same, but just because of the fact that infrastructure was already there, that work had been done, etc. Did you guys have any thoughts on that, or were you guys hoping to see more collaboration with the Green Party, for example?
To be honest with me, I really was hoping for that, because I was one of the most outspoken people on Twitter and elsewhere about how there should have been kind of a parallel, even in the state of California, where it seemed like we have a lot of openings for like movement as far as the independent politics here. I mean, we just had a person win out of the Green Party in Baldwin Park for mayor. So I was like, wow, it can be done. We just need to replicate this particular, instance. And so as far as the strategies, I have been surprised about moving for a People's Party seeming a little two-faced to me when it comes to potential allies and potential partners. And I think the ones that have been raising their voices, even way before our petition, even when, MPP was still trying to have their People's Convention and get more popular, those potential allies, I think were also disappointed at how turned off it felt that they received in trying to pitch to movement for a People's Party. They were just shocked. They were shocked and appalled. It's like, oh, you guys just want to be more isolationist and have your own thing going, separate from us. Because as an organizing working group member, I was the one, like I said, I was orientating new volunteers and stuff like that. We would answer this question a lot about the Green Party because it was asked a lot. Like, oh, aren't you guys similar to the Green Party? Are you guys gonna work with the Green Party? Things like that. We had to answer those questions, and oftentimes we were like telling them, well, in a way, we're trying to just do our own thing, before we really start branching out and working with different parties, because we're just trying to build up ourselves right now. Like we're trying to get our departments in place, and we're trying to have our groups more solid and things like that. So that's what we will respond with to those stories. And I also want to get some background on the platform, because that's another thing that people don't even know. The platform that they have right now is actually a variation of Bernie Sanders' 2016 Democratic primary platform. So if everybody's talking about, oh, it's so, progressive, and it's so like, it seems reformative and all these different, adjectives, you're actually talking about something that was pretty much plagiarized to be original by Movement for a People's Party via Nick Brana and all that stuff on their website. So just to give like some history there about the platform, because we like, I was in the Black Voter Circle along with Renee. And yes, we raised our voices about reparations. And this leadership has been lying to the public about their stance on reparations. they try to say, well, oh, we have a bunch of members that support reparations, pretty much like in theory. But if you were to really actually question people inside like the Slack working space, for example, on reparations, they couldn't tell you anything about that particular topic.
Well, I think that's a good segue into an issue at large, which is seemingly their insensitivity with race issues in general, even so far as banning people that have raised the concern about slurs being used in the Slack message, and then elevating the very person that seemingly used that slur. At least that's how I've been told how that went down. That's shocking to me. I can't imagine tolerating any kind of discourse like that in a Slack that I controlled or oversaw. So can we maybe just have a conversation about that and about some of the ways which they could have very easily ameliorated those situations instead of making them worse?
Yeah, I want to I want to like speak to that myself because I've had experience with the racism within Movement for a People's Party, but I also want to include Renee as well as Steve because like Steve, for instance, he's an anti-racism white guy. I'm gonna tell you that straight up. He came to my back a lot on our Slack workspace when racism was like incited on me, in particular. And so there's a lot of background with that. In fact, I also want to talk about like the Black voter circle itself. Like Joe had talked about earlier with the political outreach groups, we were one of the political outreach groups, but we were treated like a side chick, like pretty much. That's the equivalent of how the political outreach groups, except for maybe the Latinos for People's Party were treated, were like the side chicks. You know what I'm saying? And so we got these directives like, yeah, you basically should go out and get the blacks to come into Movement for a People's Party. It wasn't even about the policies we wanted to work on. It was about adding to their numbers. Because like I said, the way Movement for a People's Party operates, the way Nick Brana operates, is that meritocracy is based on how many eyeballs you can get on things, how many subscriptions, how many follows, that kind of stuff. So with our Black voter circle, it was like, how many blacks can y'all bring to MPP?
It's like the exact race reductionism that repels people from the Democratic Party.
Basically, yeah. It's really like that, putting people in boxes and saying, just meet the quota of bringing people in, or getting, with the DNC, for example, get the black voters to support our candidates. That's your mandate as the black people in the Democratic Party, for example. That's the same thing it was for Movement for a People's Party. And into many ways, that's what it is as well. They really don't care about like the issues, specific to the groups. So like with disabilities, I mean, there was great projects that Joe had, for example, about how law enforcement deals with disabled people. And they pretty much was passive about that. With us, we was about like reparations because that's one of the centric major issues that's talked about in the black community. And we wanted to have that on the platform or be considered a major platform option when they was going to have their founding convention and have the platform be up, which to this date, they still don't have a platform committee and subcommittees. Which they promised.
Yeah, and on reparations, I just wanted to quickly add that was even brought into the conversation of the Democratic Party primary by Marianne Williamson, who spoke at the People's Convention. So it's not like that's a topic that's never been discussed.
In fact, the Green Party has had it on their platform since 2010.
Yeah. So I think that's if they're asking you to go pretty much recruit people, but not even wanting to pay lip service to, like you said, one of the biggest issues, like that's pretty ridiculous, I think.
Right, and that's exactly how we took it. We took it as like, are you kidding me? Like, you're basically just giving us the directive to, quote, go get the blacks from MPP, but you don't really have a real true stance on, a black issue like reparations. And also I want to say that we were like a minority. When you talk about the numbers of MPP membership, well, the true number, which is more like between 25 and 2,700 people, not 100,000 and 150,000, which is like their email list numbers. We were like a major minority. We were like 30, 40 people in a Movement for a People's Party as volunteers, as organizers and stuff like that. And in our black voters group, we were only between, like at most, I think we're around 40, Renee? I would
40
say
out of like 2,700?
40 out of over 2,000 people. And so us getting the grunt of like the racism, for example, where they allowed, the N-word to be free on the Slack workspace and not be moderated. You know, things like that. And like I said, I want Renee to also speak and Steve, because, you know, like I said, they were two of the people who used to be like the angels that would come. You know, I can stand up for myself, but they would like literally come and try to stop the attacks on me and stuff like that.
And I just want to say too, before you jump in there, Renee and Steve, that is not a lofty ask. The guy from Papa John's literally lost his job for using the N-word on like a corporate Zoom call or Slack message. It is not a high expectation to not tolerate racist slurs in a Slack, and the people that use them should be pretty much instantly removed. That's not something that there should be an extended conversation about or debate about. Anyone that's, you know, contributing to an organizing effort should feel safe, should feel that they're in a welcomed and non racist space. That's the bare fucking minimum. That's the bottom line. So I'm sorry you had to go through that for one.
Can I jump in and say something real quick about that thread on the Slack? That thread went unchecked for 24 hours. While Camila and Renee and Joy and every other Black woman got lambasted. 24 hours unchecked by moderators. That is unacceptable.
And I just, you know, for clarification purposes, I never saw anyone actually use the N-word. I'll be honest. I did not spend a whole lot of time in the national Slack because things were, they were far too out of control for my liking. But what it was like a literal racial insensitivity. There were conversations about why it was okay for a white person to use the N-word and why, you know, it was poor Steve got attacked because he was a class traitor because he didn't think it was appropriate for white people to use the N-word. And what there was a lot of was nitpicking at Black people for having the audacity to ask a question, right? So you would ask a question and all the white people would jump on you like, well, why do you always have to complain? And why do you always have to say something? And I couldn't understand why that was always the response, you know? And one of the things that I'll never, because I was so fucking mad when it happened, Thomas Royko decided that he was going to call Camilla out because there was a whole, this thing in the Slack with the threads and the posts and people, you know, posting multiple times, and they were trying to get people to answer within a post. So if you have a response to somebody, you do it as a reply, you don't do it as a new post, which no problem. That's what you want, whatever. But someone made a comment and someone else who was also in the Black voters circle was like, please use reply. And they were being funny. And Thomas wrote back and was like, oh, be careful. Camila's going to come get you. And I was like, where'd that come from? Like, why are we bringing Camila up? She wasn't even part of the conversation. She didn't post anything. She wasn't involved. It wasn't about her. And I snapped and I wrote back and I was like, yo, this is inappropriate. This is totally inappropriate. You are a leader. You're a white man and you're picking on a young Black woman, and for what reason? She didn't have anything to do with this. And then of course, Laura founding member, white woman Karen, jumps in to tell me how nasty Camila always is, and
Karen,
blah blah blah. I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah, and there's even a backstory too to what she's saying.
And so she jumps in, and I had to write to her and say, listen, go do what you're doing, because if you think this is appropriate behavior from someone in leadership, then I now have a problem with you, because this should not be happening in a public space. We should not be calling out young Black people for nothing when they have nothing to do with the conversation. And far too often, white people think this is okay, and this is not okay. Like, this has to stop.
Just to clarify, someone's wondering, were there no moderators in these Slack channels?
No.
Like, what was okay, so
There was
and you're right.
That was part of the reason that we were asking for the regenerative culture to be, put back in as a working group, was because these things were happening.
Yeah.
No one was paying attention. There was no moderation. And I was big on tagging people. Like, if you started acting the fool with me, I tagged the whole CC, like, somebody come get this person.
Right.
Because I don't understand why this is being allowed, and it would just go unchecked.
Yeah, and this commenter is correct that, almost all forms of online chat will get unwieldy without moderation. We see that in our own live chat on this channel. Sometimes people, get a little bit crazy. However, we're a YouTube channel running a live show, not an organization, which is, again, requesting people's time, money, and volunteer work. There should be some basic standard of moderation to, again, ensure that it is a safe space for everyone that is offering them their time. That's really not a lofty ask. It's not something that it's just a professional, basic bare standard or expectation.
Yeah, and to give more background, with the commenter about the moderation on the workspace Slack, we were getting like these, I would say, like breadcrumbs of information about the regenerative culture working group. Well, it was originally a working group, meaning they actually had like a department head or a couple of department heads that was in the national coordinator circle, or what we would say in an acronym CC or NCC. This is the top body in Movement for a People's Party. So the equivalent of like a C-suite in a corporation, where you have like the chief of marketing, the chief of technology, all those kind of people. Those kind of people is what made up the National Coordinator Circle, NCC or CC as we call them. And so they actually gave excuses to the volunteer base, like, well, we don't have enough moderators to handle all the stuff that's going on Slack. Or they would tell us, the ones that we had felt like they couldn't do the job, so they just decided to quit, and stuff like that. Like, we would get these little things, but speaking personally, I had a hard time believing them, for the simple fact that you demoted your HR/judicial arm of the organization into a circle. And for those who don't know what a circle is, it's kind of like a cluster department within a department. So let's just say, like, in the IT, you have like a data section. You know what I'm saying? That's how it's set up in Movement for a People's Party. So when it came to them demoting the regenerative culture working group into a circle, and our petition asked for them to re-promote it back, so they can have a member on the NCC. We also got excuses like, oh, there was drama with the other leaders at the time of that regenerative culture working group, and so we just decided that it needed to be demoted. And then at one point they tried to deny. In fact, January 9th in our all volunteer meeting, which they never had throughout my whole time, was an all volunteer meeting. I actually raised my voice for them to actually have one. They said, well, all these little rumors about the regenerative culture working group being demoted, that's not true. I'm like thinking in the back of my mind, as a petitioner, not only a petitioner, but a leader of the petitioners who was involved with these negotiations, that is a bold-faced lie. So why are you lying to your volunteer base about your HR judicial arm of the organization? And then you want to say stuff like we don't have enough moderators and things to moderate these very things that you were allowing. Because it wasn't just the racism they was allowing. There was transphobia that was allowed on Slack. Like, there were other, isms and phobias and stuff they were allowing on Slack. So these things needed to be moderated. To your point, Gavin, like, these things need to be moderated because it's an organization. It should be some utmost professionalism and real true leadership and management from the top, because anytime this stuff happens is because there's right at the top of that organization. Everything starts and ends with Nick Brana and that national coordinator circle.
Yeah,
and I just want to jump in
here.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I was looping you in.
I just want to jump in because I see some people in the commentary saying like, oh, just ignore them and things like that. And I understand. Look, I'm 44 years old, so I'm old. I don't even want Black people using the word. Like, I check Black people when I hear the N-word, right? Because I just don't like the word. but I'm also a person who has done enough history, who has traveled enough to see what it looked like when the N-word was carved into a body hanging from a tree. Okay. Like the N-word's not okay, period. So in any situation, if you are working with people for whom something is physically abhorrent to them, like I'm trying not to cry right now thinking about it, right? Don't do it. You want people to work with you. You want people to help you. You want people to give you a hand. You want people to work in tangent with you to get shit done. Then don't do shit that pisses them off. And to use the N-word around me is enough to get punched in your face. So I think, given that it's something that is that problem, that it's that much of a problem for me, if we're all working together, I'm not going to call you something that's a problem for you. Don't call me something that's a problem for me, and don't tell me to ignore it, period.
Well, and it directly goes against everything that any kind of broad-based, people's powered movement that any of us want to be a part of. It directly stands in contrast with that. It is. How am I supposed to turn the other way and organize and stand in solidarity and be a comrade to somebody who is going to degrade and dehumanize and belittle the very existence of the people that I am locking arms with? It's unacceptable. So and the way that people want to frame it as if, it's impossible for white people to not use the fucking N-word. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, there are plenty of working class white people who understand that racism is a problem that needs to be excised from society. Don't set a standard so fucking low for yourself. So that would be my response.
Yeah, Zach, and I also wanted to say real quick before we get like Lisa and Steven here, the thing about people telling us, and I mean, it's not just about this, but it's also about our protest and our whistleblowing as a whole. These are probably the same people who would never tell the Amazon workers to just ignore what Jeff Bezos and his board is doing to them. They would never say, a union like the SCIU to ignore what their employers are doing to them. It's the same equivalent. So if you call yourself a progressive, you call yourself a leftist, and you claim to be about the labor movement, you claim to be about $15 minimum wage or $25 minimum wage or whatever, for you to say that we should ignore, that leadership treating us like trash, how would you feel if you were in the same position? I don't think you would be acting the same, and you would be saying those kind of comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so well said from all of you. And again, thank you for sharing your experiences here with us today. I guess another question I have is just kind of going to what you just said, Camila, about Nick Brana. And that's, to any extent, have you guys been at all approached by MPP leadership to try to make amends with the situation, to try to move on? And as a follow-up, is there anything that you would just ask for to maybe ameliorate the situation, to maybe potentially move beyond it? Would it take Nick Brana, stepping down or being removed from leadership and a complete new team essentially taking up that mantle? Or I guess I just want a general reflection on the way forward, or what you see as being the path now. So and we can start with you, Lisa.
Yeah, let me jump in. I was one of the petitioners that full out left during this disaster after their third meeting. And I checked out. You can ask Renee, because I was with the New York hub with her, because I didn't know one existed. So that's another story. But it was very clear to me the day it was December 18th or 19th, a Friday. They were still doing the shit we were trying to check them for when they decided to tell us we're participating in force the vote. Here, there was no plan, and me, Camila, Renee are in the media messaging group. Again, no transparency, no one, they're just telling us what to do, which was part of the problem. We had no input, absolutely nothing. And in fact, me and Renee were talking about doing something similar that very week. I literally went out and actually bought the website, which is another story. And then all of a sudden they put this out, and did they just kind of take our idea? Or was this still in the planning last minute like everything else? And I told Renee, I'm done. I'm absolutely done with these people. At that point, it was stalling. At this point, the end of November, after that second meeting, people left. Lots of people left during this whole petition process. Everyone else here, I believe, was removed. And Renee and Joe specifically were Dem infiltrators, which we can prove that not to be true. Let's be real. We've already done it. Camila was an angry black woman, and Steve was just the white guy trying to help out. So the way forward is not MPP. People's Party, it does not exist. It is a clout-chasing machine for Nick Brana, Nick and Co. You will never, ever hear me say otherwise. They are incompetent. They don't know what the hell they're doing. And then they put out this PR story just for what? It's disprovable. They have these videos I sent you. Yeah. They have it. Except they would not provide a recording for us after this 2-hour fiasco that happened as our second meeting, because they wanted to control the recording of a 20-minute meeting at 11 o'clock at night after 2 hours of disrespectfully making us wait, because they wanted us last minute to go to their recording or their Zoom that was out for days that almost 200 petitioners had at this point. So they are incompetent. They have no idea what the hell they are doing. They do not take constructive criticism at all. And let me point this out if it's not clear. This Dem infiltrator story was the next day, November 11th, not just mid-January. They were already grabbing petitioners one-on-one to talk to them, or even like little groups. Oh, we think it's Dem infiltration. We have the notes. Actually, I didn't even provide it to you, but I will give it to you. We literally put on our pre-petition notes on November 8th that we knew that this was a concern of theirs because they are so paranoid. And it happened. So this narrative that this Dem infiltration, oh, well, there's people, there's no one trying to get into Nick Brana's party. It is nowhere. It is an email list grab for money. That is it. If they're organizing, I don't know what the hell they are doing, because me and Renee had a great idea and I showed it to her. All these, the election had just happened. Well, you can find all the empty local seats in Google. Hey, why not just get people to run there? Kind of like Steve. Great idea, instead of grabbing people who lost an election, right? No, that's not their plan. In fact,
well, I do want to get Steve jumped in here really quickly, just because we do want to have just a few minutes left in the stream, and I wanted to get back to him. He put a comment and said that you had another point to make, Steve.
Yeah, just to go back to the racism in the Slack a little bit, I just wanted to touch on my experience with how that went down. The thing that you guys got to realize about the night that happened, now, how this all came to a head was because that night, this person who I had gotten into an argument in their Slack with had revealed the petition to the Slack at large. Now, up until this moment, we had never spoke publicly about the petition because the CC had asked us not to. They had said, we don't want to cause a bunch of problems with people thinking, like we're having arguments and falling apart internally already. So can we keep this under wraps? Please do not go around talking about the petition. So we respected that for the entire month of November and December. Then all of a sudden, this person went into the Slack, started posting about the petition, started saying, that we were Democratic infiltrators, this, that, and the other. And that's when I got involved. I was kind of like, this is ridiculous that the CC is allowing this post to stay up. If we are going to talk about the petition, let's talk about the petition. So that's when I came in and I said, if we're going to talk about this, can you answer A? Can you answer B? Can you answer C? Asking all these questions. And that's when this person started attacking me and started bringing in the racism into it and started talking about, how there's such thing as non-binary and Black privilege in this Slack. That how is there no such thing as an N-word pass? Haven't you heard that before? Things like that. And this is at 3-4 in the morning. And it's only me and Camila who are in there trying to defend it. And I'm having 2, 3, 4, 5 different people who are coming at me from all angles. They're saying you're a class traitor. The way that you're talking right now is going to turn working class people off. they're not going to want to worry about these identity politics. You're obviously a Democrat if you're bringing identity politics into this. You're a race traitor. All of these other things that are being said to me. And finally, I got fed up and I tagged the entire coordinator circle. I tagged Nick. I tagged Tiffany. I tagged all of them. And I said, are you okay with this? This post that is above, that is saying all of these things, that is discussing our petition, that is supporting white supremacy. Are you okay with this? I went to bed. 2 hours later, I got up, go on to Slack, and I'm banned. Everything was removed from me. My access was removed. I had no email saying I was removed. I just couldn't access anything. So now,
and let me inject one thing real quick.
One thing. So then 2 days later, after this whole thing goes down, I'm watching their national call, and who do I see getting the final speaking spot but that person who was arguing with me and calling me a class traitor, who was calling me a race traitor? Nick gave him the final speaking spot on a national call, but couldn't even give us the dignity of an explanation for why we were removed.
Yeah, I also wanted to tell, Zac and Gavin, like, if you want us to come back, I mean, it's so much, really. It's a lot of a case that we have, of our experiences and the experiences of, other volunteers and stuff like that. And like I said, it's not to, tear, Nick Brana and the People's Party down. They have done some good things, but there's also a barrage of stuff that they are scared straight to bring to like your audience, to the general public as well. That those back room closets, those skeleton closets of theirs, they don't want out in the public. That's why they want us silent. They want us not to speak the truth, because this is truth to power. Because they think that, since we're cool with people like Jimmy Dore, we can say whatever to the public and they're never going to investigate it. They're never going to ask the questions. They're going to give us little light taps in interviews and things like that. So, like I said, it's so much, to try to pack into, like a 1 or 2 hour, thing.
Sure.
But, we just want to warn the public, like, please be careful about joining these organizations. Do your homework. Talk to people who are already in. Get the other side of stuff, not just the goody two shoes stuff that you see promoted in the public, but also find out what do they do behind closed doors. What kind of leadership, are they dealing with, as members have been in for a while? Because with our group, our length of involvement went from around 6 months to the beginning of when MPP started, which was in 2017. It stretches that much, and then it's diverse. And it's also all across the country. This is not just some pocket of a region that was in our petitions group. This is people represented from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Exactly. And we at the Vanguard will continue to provide the most well-rounded coverage that we can on this matter. And we certainly thank you guys for joining us today. And while we might not have been able to cover everything this first go around, I do think that this conversation has been extremely successful in dealing with one of the common, pieces of what I would consider good faith criticism from people who listen to our show, where they were just looking for more clarity, more context, because it has been so limited in the scope of what people are able to understand, particularly if people are just grabbing bits and pieces of information. They're excited about a third party, but, they're busy, they work, maybe 2 jobs. We're Gavin and I feel really fortunate and really grateful that you guys took the time to sit down with us today and really iron this all out for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, I think that you're absolutely right, Camila, when you say if you're out there and you want to further these causes, as Zac and I do here at the Vanguard, the third party movement, for example, is something we talk about a lot, and we encourage people, to participate in that kind of organizing. But you're absolutely right. You need to do your homework, and you need to understand what kind of an organization it is that you're dedicating your time to or your money to. Also, if you're wanting to donate to one of these causes, it's very important to understand. And if anyone feels, again, at all like this was unfair or that the MPP side of the story was not represented, I just want to make it explicitly clear one more time. We reached out to Nick Brana directly and to the People's Party directly, trying to get them to come on here to give their side of the story. We told them it could be on a separate call, not this one, so they didn't feel like they were being dogpiled. We want to have a conversation and get to the bottom of this story. We want to see any evidence that they might have, that there were infiltrators involved. People have messaged us directly telling us that, and we asked for the evidence. None was provided. Again, we're not going to go up here and bolster baseless allegations against people that are putting in their labor and their time for an organization that we agree with the ultimate project of. If they're being disrespected and being smeared as infiltrators with no evidence provided. And again, I'll just say, regardless of the organization, it does not reflect well on any group that refuses to take any tough questions. Basically, Nick Brana went on Lee Camp's show, as I understand, did a softball interview, and Annelise Garcia went on Jackson Hinkle's program and did a softball interview, and that's it. They don't want to engage with the subject matter anymore. They don't want to come on any channel that's going to give them any tough questions. Franco from Frank Analysis has tried to get them on his show to have a fair, reasonable, calm discussion. Again, he's also someone that agrees with the stated goals and the mission of a third party. Other channels that I'm aware of have been trying to have this conversation because, again, we want to be honest. We want to be fair. We're trying to do good work, and we actually think that there's value in getting both sides of the story. However, when one group just wants to completely shut out any conversation, not engage with this, and try to sweep it under the rug, basically what we're going to be left with is those of you who do want to talk about it, and that's who we have to platform. So we hope this was fair. We tried to be as honest as possible. We still would, love to have someone on the People's Party to continue this conversation, but we are going to ask tough questions. We're not just going to give you a platform to spew propaganda and to prop up an organization which seems to be disrespecting people, taking organizations or organizers and volunteers' time, and have nothing to show for it. So I guess that's just my message to conclude this. And again, if anyone's watching that felt like this was unfair, we tried to get those people on our show to rep that opinion. And also, as one final thing, to all the other channels out there that are refusing to have you guys on and are doing propaganda for the People's Party, you know who you are, and it's not a service to anyone. It's not valuable. It's basically useless. So stop doing that.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. We know who you are. There's a reason that the MPP leadership will go on Lee Camp's show or will go on Jackson Hinkle's show, right? It's because that those people have a vested interest in growing the People's Party, and it's growing increasingly obvious. So here at the Vanguard, we're going to continue to ask tough questions. We're going to have all sides on, and as long as you're willing to sit in the hot seat, you can share your position. Thank you so much to everybody that joined in today. It was so great speaking with you. I'm sure we'll be in touch, continued. We're going to keep following this story. Thanks to everybody in the comment section for listening. If this is your first time tuning into the Vanguard, be sure to hit the bell, like, and subscribe to grow the channel. Thanks so much for everybody. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And just as a final thing before we sign off, I wanted to let everyone know as well that we will be publishing shortly an article version of this conversation, essentially, where we do put some of the best information that was revealed and some of the best quotes, for example, into a more digestible article, which people can share with their friends. Maybe if you're intimidated by a 2-hour-long stream where we get in the weeds, it might be more digestible to have an explainer piece. So again, that'll be out within the next 24 hours. Hopefully, we'll be sharing that on our social media. So follow us on Twitter. The link for that is in the description below. Again, we're trying to do good work here. We're trying to platform both sides and be fair. We want to get to the bottom of this and make sure that our fellow comrades are being respected and that their time and labor is going to the right causes, and that we're not all getting distracted and wasting our time and money. So thanks everyone, and everyone have a beautiful weekend.
Thanks so much again, guys. Thank you.